Welcome to the Germinate podcast, where agriculture, business, and innovation take root and thrive. I'm Joe Sampson, and with nearly 2 decades of experience in agricultural equipment and scaling businesses, I'm here to bring you actionable insights, inspiring stories, and strategic advice. Whether you're an industry veteran or just starting out, this podcast is your guide to cultivating ideas, expanding your knowledge, and growing your venture. So let's get started and germinate your path to success. How many networking groups have you joined that meet a couple of times a year and fizzle out? I know a lot of us have. That is why we are creating the Momentum Networking Group. It's going to be led by myself and Mr. Jeremy Kredeke of Syngenta's digital strategy team. Our monthly virtual sessions are going to bring guest experts to help you grow and drive results to your company. Connect, learn, and build momentum together. That is the exact idea of the Momentum Networking Group. Sign up today at embosales.com/events. That's www.embosales.com/events. All right, folks, welcome back to the Germinate podcast. I want to thank the sponsors again today. First and foremost, let's go with GBGI USA, gbgiusa.com. Ran by Pete Casamento, the Casamento family, Mark Adams, the VP of Sales, Jamie Casamento's a big player over there as well. They are really moving and shaking in the distribution space in the equipment world, and also to the whole gooders as well. So check them out online. It's sponsors like that really make this show possible. So thank you guys over at GBGI for helping out with the Germinate podcast. I also want to do a quick shout out to the Momentum Network. I'm wearing the hat today. This is a monthly webinar that myself and partner Jeremy Kredeke are putting on. Jeremy is Mr. Ag Tech and not IT. I about said IT, AI, and way more intelligent and smarter than me. And so we've had some really cool guests and really cool conversations on those monthly webinars. That's coming up. Next one is October 24th, 8:30 a.m. Central Time, 8:30 to 10 Central. So join us for the Momentum Network. You can check that out on our website, embosales.com. Enough of the promotions. I wish I had more. I'll shout out to my herbal teas this morning. I appreciate those that like mint Majesty teas. That's my jam. So with that all said, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while because Leah Olson and I I think we go way back. I'm gonna throw it out there like 20 years, Leah. This is wild, but maybe not quite that long, but close.
Yeah, it's a while.
It's a while. And I met you when you were, I'm not sure what the title called, but executive director maybe of AMC, which is the Association of Manufacturers of Canada,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I was president of the association, and you meet so many people in that role because you have to work with everybody across the industry, and you always stood out as somebody that was fantastic energy and positive contributions to any discussions we were having. So, yeah, you're an easy friend.
I'm humbled. That's for one. Thank you. I will say this. You always stood out to me. I was like, Leah's going to be like the prime minister of Canada someday. I'm not kidding you either. I was like super, and everybody thinks that you have this. Number one, you're super intelligent, but you have a way to speak to those of us that aren't intelligent in a way that make us feel intelligent. I know that sounds weird, but you're humble about it, and you've got this caring soul in you that says you want businesses around you and interactions around you to succeed. And I just remember that, and from the AMC days, and then you've had this unbelievable career since then, and it's still tracking along the way. So kind of, though a lot of people know you already, but those that don't, tell everybody a little bit about you, your background, and get us up to present day here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think the reason that I, enjoy people is because I grew up in a farm outside of a community of less than 100 people. And my mom tells a funny story that I came home from my first day at kindergarten and I lost my voice because I was just so excited to talk to people.
I bet, yeah.
clearly I'm an extrovert, but, also a farm kid. And, my career really began with my dad, who developed the hitching system that is now used on most of the 400 horsepower plus tractors in the world. And so from a very early age, farm shows were a big part of who I was. And so when people ask, like, what was your first job? I'm like, well, I don't really know. I didn't get paid to do that, but I definitely had an investment into, dad's success and keeping farmers safe. So throughout my career, I've worked for a couple of multinationals in the pharmaceutical world, in the rail industry, and in the chemical and seed industry, but I've always been most attracted to the small and medium-sized companies where you can really make a difference. So, I took over at AMC in 2015, and, the industry at that time in Canada was not fully recognized and really understated. And a big part of that is because most of the manufacturers are in smaller communities of less than 10,000 people. And so they would, do their work. They were exporting to over 150 countries, and yet policymakers, both at the federal and provincial level, had no idea.
Yeah.
And so, it was a great opportunity to be able to connect with many people that I'd known for many years and to do so in a way that really helped their business. And then as a result, I also got to know those that were in the US a bit better too, because they were looking to come into Canada and, grow their business in, across Canada.
Yeah,
So
there's always been sort of a friendly trade agreement, I guess, and I don't wanna set I'm not talking about, like, NAFTA or anything like that, I'm talking about just Canada and the US, we've always had this friendly relationship of commerce back and forth.
absolutely,
Yeah,
and I think, we can maybe come back to that, later in the conversation, but that's something that I think as an ag equipment manufacturer, you always take that for granted because you've got suppliers across on both sides. And, it does feel like we're brothers or sisters or, that we're family because we
right.
work so well together. And so when I was at AMC, I got to, work with a lot of different people. And then I went over to Seedmaster and Dot to help make sure that Seedmaster was running well and optimized in terms of their dealership network, but also to set up this little company called Dot Technology Corp, which was 100% an autonomous farm power unit. And through that, I got to, know people in the auto industry because some of what we were doing, I recognized that we weren't unique in autonomous equipment, that there's others like the auto industry that were already doing that. So
Sure.
what lessons could we be learning? So I was there for a while and then, developed a good relationship with Raven Industries, and of course, Raven then did an acquisition of Dot, and that I think worked out well for the Bojo family, and then after that, I went over to the Prairie Agriculture Machinery Institute, and at that time, that was the 3rd organization that I was going to where they were that they were struggling a little bit, and, the mandate I had was to make a decision as to whether or not to keep the organization and grow it or to put the organization like, to shut it down, and worked really closely with the employees who were very passionate about their work and also with customers, and we had some major OEMs that really valued the work that Pammy did because, of course, we did product development. We helped them with that. We didn't own the IP, and so we helped them develop their IP, but we also did head-to-head testing that was valuable for them to better understand the product's capabilities and what their competitors were doing. And by the time I think it was in almost getting close to the 4th year, I was pretty tuckered out, and so, I had worked with the board to ensure that there was a good transition plan because the organization, we didn't want it to just survive, we wanted it to really thrive,
Sure.
and I knew that I'd probably come to my end there because I was tuckered out, and we accomplished a significant amount of work there. But the new CEO who came in is doing an exceptional job, and the organization continues to do well today. I think if nobody knows Lauren Grieger, they should, because Lauren leads on the business development side there, and a real pleasure to work with, but also a very good engineer and can often make quick decisions as to whether or not PAMI's capabilities can help a client or not. So from PAMI, I then went to Corteva, and they moved my husband and I to Calgary. And within 5 months, they asked if I would move to Iowa,
To Johnston, Iowa, wasn't it?
Johnston,
Yeah,
Iowa.
which is where I sit right now, which is a small world. Yep.
Well, and it would have been so good to be your neighbor.
I know.
Don't,
I coulda it's funny, our house the house next door to us is for sale right now. It's like, "Oh, Leah, come on."
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so but it was a challenge for us because we had just moved. We had
Of
selected
course.
Calgary based on where would my husband be really happy farming, and
Yeah.
did we have farm opportunities, and he did outside of Calgary. He farms with a really good friend of his, and, where can I be off farm income? And so when I was offered this opportunity to move to Iowa, to Johnston, I was like, "I can't do that." Like, our boxes aren't even unpacked yet. And so my role was eliminated. And, that caught me off guard a bit as we were discussing, in that I wasn't ready for that. But I'm grateful looking back because it forced me to really look at what's important in my career. Who do I want to be working with? And, what do I want to do? And I'm the type of person that I love working. I've always loved working. And a lot of that is because I'm usually doing stuff that I'm super interested in, and
Uh-huh.
so I'm not one of those people that, like, I when people say work-life balance, I'm like, "Well, I don't know, I work to me is life to a certain degree." And so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like, and sometimes I'll do, 80% work in the week, and sometimes it's less, but
Yeah,
that's the
sure.
flexibility you get when you're doing, some contracting on your own, I guess.
That's pretty much you in a nutshell, and what you probably didn't say was you have been hired by these companies to, in a sense, lead them. Your role has been like the CEO for these I mean, for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not coming in these are huge giant roles where you're trying to reshape an entire organization, or maybe that's not it. You might be reshaping an organization, or you might be trying to find a different direction for them to go. It's a huge, huge lift, is basically what I'm saying. I mean, those are some major careers in a 10-year, 15-year window.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was always as CEO except at Corteva. At Corteva, and that was, a conscious decision on my part, was when I went to Corteva, I wanted to join and come in at the operations level because I knew that as a CEO, you don't get the full story. People will tell you what they think you need to know or what you want to know, and not to say there's anything perverse about that. But when I went to Corteva, I wanted to understand the business, and where are we leaving value on the table, and
Yeah.
where are we optimizing? And then in addition, how is this serving our clients, which at the end of the day are farmers? Of course, chemical and seed companies go through retailers, but I was really excited to be more on the operations side. And so yeah, it's been a journey, as I hope everybody would think of their career as they look back on it.
Yeah, I think that's the right word. There's definitely I always liken it to like, our lives are like these maps, and you move up a little bit, you might move back, you might go right, you might go left, but you're always putting a mark on it. And you've definitely put some impressive marks down. And I like what you said about not not being in on the CEO seat, but sometimes when you're in the CEO seat, people tell you what you wanna hear instead of really what you need to hear. Why do you think what's your psychological take on that? You've been a CEO a lot, so, you know, unpack it for us.
So I teach university right now. I'm teaching a class called Innovation in Agriculture, and it's for third year business students. And I've said to them, they've had questions. They're like, "You were a CEO, what's it like to have all that power?"
Yeah.
And I think that, the title sounds really powerful, and for sure it is. But the flip side is you've got major responsibility. And so it's a little like running a marathon. I know Pete runs marathons, and I've run a couple, but you don't generally wake up one day and say, "I'm gonna run a marathon." Like that would be you can do it, but it's gonna be tough on your body, and it's gonna be harder to recover than if you train well. CEO thing, I think, is very similar in that you want to get up to that level of responsibility because once you get that, you do need to be able to learn really quickly. You have to have your finger on a number of different topics. Not all of them are related. So whether
Mhm.
it's HR, cash flow, or operations, and especially now in the ag equipment side, there's AI, there's machine learning that is coming. And so for those that have always thought, well, we're just metal manipulators, and I don't think anyone like that's being a bit condescending on my part. I don't mean that. But AI in digital transformation, you have to start embracing it. And
Sure.
whether that's on your product and services or on your business side, it's here to stay. And so I think the challenge when someone is talking with a CEO is if that CEO is like, I'm the most important person in the room, they're really missing out on where the business can go. So, I think most CEOs recognize they're not the most important person in the room. They might be well networked, but there's still that fear or like the CEO has the ability to make decisions and they can make them quickly. And so there's a bit of assumptions made about the CEO title that is not always true in my view.
Yeah.
Um and so I think that has a lot to do with it. And also people are worried that they don't want to overwhelm the CEO. Like they don't want the CEO to think they've got lots of problems that they can't solve. But, on the flip side, like I had worked with one of my team members who said that he didn't bring problems to me because he knew that I was solutions based. And I said, but if there's and we worked together for a while, and so we eventually got to a spot where we went, from being really polite and professional, which is always important, but to being very real and genuine with each other. So when he was having an off day or if I was having an off day, we let each other know. And so we didn't
Sure.
have to be perfect all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
which made for a more productive and healthier relationship.
Yeah.
And so I think, that on like when you are a CEO, being genuine is super important because then it helps the team know that they can trust you. You like
Yeah.
everybody always says, let's trust, you trust all of everybody. But the reality is that you're going to see that in, say, the lunchroom or in Zoom calls, and, you make your decisions accordingly.
Yeah. I think I saw a metaphor. I don't know if you watch or follow the Diary of a CEO podcast. It's really good. If you
No, I
don't, you
don't.
should check it out. Diary of a CEO. Stephen Bartlett is his name, and he's amazing at what he does. But he said something to the effect of, a good CEO, more or less, I'm not shelling here, but more or less takes all the blame, but none of the credit. And I think that's probably a good metaphor here. And I'm working with a CEO now in Des Moines, actually, who is a new CEO, feels a ton of pressure. That's the one thing that some people don't know is there's a ton of pressure when it comes to that role. You've got to understand all the aspects of the business, but you've also got to put a ton of trust in your people to execute. And that's his mentality for sure. He's just like, I just want us to succeed so everybody can share that that feeling that we all are chasing. And if it doesn't work, it's all on me. And I'm like, man, that's a lot of pressure. And I don't know if I agree 100% with that, but you know, what's your take on that?
Yeah. I think the imposter syndrome is very real,
Yeah.
particularly for newer CEOs, and I felt that when I first took over at the Ag Manufacturers of Canada. I thought it was probably pretty apparent that I was super experienced and not appropriate for the role. But on the flip side, towards the end, I realized once we'd made quite a few changes and we were on the radar screen of policymakers, both provincially and federally, that, we really had pulled together. And that's where I started to realize, okay, no, I do have this. This is not a, like I'm okay.
Yeah, right.
Um, and I think that there is that pressure when you're the CEO that you are the face of the organization for not only, external clients, but also for your employees. And the one thing that I had underestimated was that if I didn't speak clearly to employees, that would cause confusion. And so by the time I was CEO the second and third time, definitely the third time at PAMI, it allowed like I was much more sensitive to how my tone, the words, my body language could be interpreted. And to the point where, like I always practiced when I'm gonna deliver, bad news, for example. And like with Pammy, we went through a major transformation, and so I would, talk to our team, and rather than, doing a big announcement as a group, I would usually go to certain people in advance and I'd talk with them so that I could find out what's on their minds, what are they worried about, and I'd start to test ideas. And I've heard other CEOs say that they would test ideas with employees, and what they're trying to do is just get a sense of what are employees thinking about? What are they sensitive to? What are they excited about? Where do they think there's opportunities for the organization to grow? And I think, walking around like on my end, I've always been one who has walked around the plant, so to speak. And I think that's really vital because your senior management team will tell you one thing, but when employees don't have a barrier between, if if everything is good in the organization, what they say and what your senior managers or your direct reports will say to you are very, very similar. But if
Yeah.
there's any sort of incoherence there, that should be a CEO's heads up that you're not being told everything and you don't know everything, right? So that's been something that I've always tried to ensure that I do, and I learned that more towards the last role I had as a CEO was just the importance of trust and listening. Like I think I listened much more at PAMI than I did at AMC, and I I'm a little embarrassed to say that, but yeah. And part of that is being comfortable in your skin, right? And knowing that you got this.
I love what you said about imposter syndrome. It's so true. You gotta kind of earn it too. And sometimes that comes with the struggles, in my opinion. That never comes with the wins. You got to learn it from the struggles and from the things that you screwed up on. And, the wisest people in the world know that they screw up and know that they make mistakes. And the wisest people learn from those. And it's one thing, yeah, you throw words around like honesty and trust and listening. And those are hard things to do and hard things to earn. But once you get them, boy, that's when real change can happen too, and real positive things can happen and gives people a purpose. So yeah, I love it. Hey folks, let's pause the podcast for a second to talk about one of the companies making the Germinate podcast possible. Want to give a huge thanks to GBGI. Here's Mark Adams.
Thanks, Joe. At our shop in Chardon, Ohio, every part we build is made with precision. From the CNC machining to the final inspection, we don't rush because we know your customers can't afford failure. If you're a dealer or OEM who wants reliability built in, give us a look. GBGI, built to spec, built to last. Learn more at gbgiusa.com. GBGI, grow with us.
To shift gears a little bit on that, clearly you have a ton of experience and you got involved with Canadian policy, specifically as it relates to agriculture, probably in the AMC days, is that right? Or even maybe before that?
I mean, I've always been, early in my career, I worked for Canadian Pacific Railway, so which
Okay.
is now CPKC, and I was always the lead on the grain file from a PR communications, government relations perspective, and then, um, I ended up transitioning. I think I got a job that nobody else had applied for, but they say that's not true. And it was managing the what is called the revenue cap or the maximum revenue entitlement, and it's the regulated movement of grains in Western Canada to export markets. And the federal government, regulates that because we've got, a monopolistic, situation with only 2 railways, serving most farmers. And so my introduction to the grain industry, again, coming from a farm, has always been really strong, and so I was aware of what was happening in the grain industry, but the agriculture has always like, the public policy, I've always been involved in that, from my time at the railway, and then I actually jumped from the private sector into the political realm, and I was a senior, political advisor to the federal ministers of finance, industry, foreign affairs, and immigration, and so
What a
that's
title
where
that is, by the way.
yeah, well, they were all different, right? And,
Right.
but I mean, it's really where you have to look at what, from a public policy perspective, are we trying to do for the agriculture industry or for the economy?
Yeah.
And that was where I probably got more experience and exposure to public policy than I had expected.
Yeah, and you've got this background, and so you have expert skills at this, and obviously it's a huge talking point right now, specifically in the US and outside the US, because we are this global market, and our our leadership, and I'm not here to pick on it right or wrong, but our leadership decided in whatever it was, January of this year, to introduce these little things called tariffs,
Yeah.
and it's a hard topic because, you get it, I get it, I get it. You wanna make as much as you can in our country. Everybody's on board with that. Um, but, everybody also wants money to grow on trees and stuff too. What's reality here? And I think that's the hard part. And the consequence to tariffs is it is making it our neighbors to the north, you all, the Canadians, and I mean, my time in the private world, I traveled to and from Canada, I don't know, 6, 7 times a year, it seemed. I was always up there, because it was very easy to do business. We had similar quality standards, similar people, similar labor, all the things. And now the tariff has taken place, and during a time in agriculture when it's really, really tough to do business anyways. And so right now, US farmers are trying to figure out what the next move is and what to do, and I'm sure it's going on in Canada as well. What can we do, and what should we do, and what policy needs to be made? And just recently, was it yesterday or 2 days ago? I'm trying to think where you were just at. You just go ahead.
I was in Ottawa at a conference that was being held by the Canadian Agriculture Policy Institute, CAPI, and it was talking about, what are the risks for agriculture? What are the opportunities? And I think, the relationship that we've had with one another is always has always been very positive. And I recall the day when, the US administration announced the tariffs, and I felt like I'd just been kicked in the gut. And it was, like, kicked in the gut by, like, somebody that I loved a lot. And it just seemed so odd, but at the same time, the president was very clear in November as to what he was gonna do and why he was gonna do it. And so I think, it's really been eye-opening as to how quickly the changes have occurred, and I'm concerned that, in Canada, most of our agriculture crew like, farmers are in rural areas
Mhm.
and tend to look at government as, somebody that you want to help you with protection, to keep the law and order, and beyond that, maybe not involved in my day-to-day and in my business, and so with that, as sort of a background, if you don't vote to the right, there's not like, who are you gonna vote for? And so there's a bit of a political dilemma, I think, that some, people are facing because when the government says, "We're gonna do tariffs, and then we're gonna do counter tariffs on, like, on the Canadian side," I mean, the only people that really prosper from a tariff is government. That
Yeah.
money doesn't go into any new jobs, and so I'm hoping that we can take a step back and say, "What are we trying to achieve here?" Because if it's about economic prosperity in the US, I know that there's a path forward there. The challenge for us, on the Canadian side is that we've had such positive relationship with the US that we perhaps have taken it for granted. And, you know, a at this point, Canada has to start looking at diversifying. My concern for the farm industry writ large is that I don't know how prices of equipment or inputs are going to go down. Like, they just won't, and I've
100%.
heard, like, different people try to talk their way out of that, "Well, that's not really going to happen," and it's like, well, all of the manufacture everything that's in manufacturing is more expensive right now.
And show me historically, has it ever gone down? No. The answer to that is no. Now, inputs and things like that could change. I highly doubt that too. So basically, what do we do is rely on the commodity price at that point in time. And that's a supply and demand driven market. And one thing that's scary about the US, and I don't mean to interject here because your train of thought's awesome. So go back to it. But one thing about the US is we haven't got a PO from China for soybeans during this tariff talk. And we might not ever get a PO from China ever. I'm not kidding here, ever again. It's right now, it might be a big FU to Trump and the industry, but they have to develop relationships with specifically Brazil and Argentina, and then as they develop those, well, what's the incentive to come back to the US?
Yeah.
That's a scary thing to say. It's not like they're our only option either, but your train of thought was similar to that too with your country. It's like, okay, we relied heavily on the United States, and now we can't. So we have to develop another alternative. It's kinda like if you lose your best customer in business. You could sulk and be mad about it, feel like you got kicked in the gut for a period of time, but you gotta pick yourself up and go find another customer, right?
Yeah. Or listen to what the customer is saying and adapt accordingly. And I think on our end, where, where it's helping is to recognize the strong relationships that we continue to have. I think that, the supply chain across the Canada-US border is still very strong. A bit strained right now because everything that's going around is now coming under border services scrutiny. Uh, and again, appropriately with, the US administration sort of, putting the tariffs in place.
What do you mean by border services scrutiny?
Well, just in terms of, like, the charges and where's everything
Oh, I see.
originating
I gotcha.
from, and so, there's a lot more scrutiny in terms of, like, something that you've never had to look at, that now you've gotta prove where it's come from to, to the border,
Yeah,
and
this is 10%, this is
yeah.
15%, that's 25. Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
yeah, and doing those calculations, and again, like, when we think about, you know, let's say 2 years from now, hopefully we look back on this and we think, "Oh, that was interesting times," but we've come out on the other end, and my hope is that, we will come out on the other end because there have been some really great announcements about, new trade agreements, new investments into manufacturing in the US. But the reality is that food security, whether it's in the US, Canada, China, Australia, wherever, we need to ensure that, we can feed the world. And by working together, I believe strongly that we can. And it's not just from the farmer's perspective, but it's also from the researcher's perspective, from R&D. What sort of seeds or chemicals do we need in order to give the plants the best fighting chance in light of climate change or in light of how the climate is changing? And I really that's where I think our diversity helps us, because if there's drought conditions in Australia and there's not drought in North America, then where's that food coming from? It's coming from North America. And it's all goes ebbs and flows in terms of the changing in our environments. So I'm a big believer that, we are better by working together,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
It's 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 yet to be determined on what's gonna happen here. How long is this going to go on to where it continues to be kind of a deterrent to do business? Because right now, it's definitely a roadblock. It's bigger than that. It's an obstacle, a huge one, and it's challenging for everybody. Nobody in agriculture is really thriving right now, with the exception of a few little pockets here and there, and I'm still all about finding opportunities that way. But I'll tell you what the US guys are typically, at least the US guys run around in my circle. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying collectively as a whole, but a lot of them are saying, hey, we know how to grow a crop, but now so does Brazil and Argentina. So there's this glut specifically of soybeans and corn. And so we have to have these alternative options to sell it. Is it the ethanol industry? Well, the problem with the ethanol industry is we're probably at the peak of using gasoline right now
Yeah.
because electric cars are coming. And I think that technology is pretty damn impressive. And even if we stop, don't buy electric cars, a lot of the gasoline and cars are being more efficient. And, you can get 30, 35, 40 miles per gallon on some of this stuff. We're just not going to we're probably at peak usage of oil gas, I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
Yeah.
So then ethanol is at peak usage. So what's next? And it's confusing, Leah. It really is. I mean, these guys are now you have to spend a ton of money on technology and efficiency and autonomy and all the things to make sure you have the most efficient crop on planet Earth. And that's expensive. Tell that to a, family farm in rural wherever, right? It's tough.
Well, and I think, the worry, when we look at how much time is being spent right now on trying to address the trade war, and my concern is that we could spend that same amount of time being productive, and yet there's nobody, as far as I can see, and again, this is, I know the US administration has done some things to help generate what they believe are stronger jobs in the US market. But on the manufacturing side, and I recall when I was on the board of the Association of Equipment Manufacturers a couple of years ago, and this was in the first round when Trump was president, and we as Canadians were asking our American counterparts, how are you dealing with the tariffs? And like, we're seeing our costs are going up. Like, you have to be seeing your costs go up. And they said, we are seeing our costs go up. And one of them had written to the Wall Street Journal, and had addressed it to the then president at the time, and said, just kind of did a bit of a reality check, and instantly got a call from Dealership Network saying, do not ever do that again, because that will like, the people that we sell to, the farmers that we sell to are big, big, supporters of President Trump. And again, I worry that again, I've heard that President Trump is very, very smart. I have no doubt that he is. But at this point, it's hard for a like, for me to understand the logic on these trade tariffs and what the bigger plan is. And so when we look at where the economy is, particularly on the agriculture side, farm equipment is gonna get more expensive. There's no way it's not gonna get more expensive, and I think he was very good about saying, "This is gonna be a bit of a difficult time." He said that, I think, in February, and I'm just not sure how he's going to work with those that have helped support him over the years, and, to help them be able to afford the farm equipment. If and again, that's not his job, but the repercussions of some of the
Yes.
tariffs is that farm equipment is gonna be expensive, and it's already been expensive. So, that's where I think there's maybe an opportunity for disruption, within the industry, because, necessity is the mother of innovation, and
Yeah.
so maybe this is that time where we're gonna see a digital transformation. We'll see some significant changes in agriculture because we have to, and you just cannot keep spending over 1,000,000 and 1,500,000 on a combine. Um, I don't know.
Well, you've been to farm shows your whole life, and so have I. This last Farm Progress show in Decatur, Illinois was alarming at how expensive this equipment is. Not just the $1,000,000 combines and tractors, but even small little implements that go on, whatever, a little garden tractor. They're crazy expensive. There's a lot of steel, there's a lot of parts, and most of that steel or some of that steel and some of those parts aren't US made. I mean, that's just not what the US has not made that stuff for take a bearing, for instance, which how
Yeah.
many bearings are on most everything that we use, tons of them. America hasn't really been a bearing supplier for 30 some years, or a bearing manufacturer for 30 years. We've always relied on outside sources for that, specifically in other countries. Now, are we going to be able to build a bearing in America? That, I think, to me, is not really the point. The point is we can't do that tomorrow. So, okay, if there's a bearing company that commits to being manufactured in the US, that's going to take a long time. What about between now and then? What are we going to do? What's the gap here? Are we just going to let people kind of, you know, what are we doing? And I'm by no means smart enough to understand that. I have no idea. That's why I have conversations with people like you, because it's true. I mean, equipment is not going to get cheaper. Everything was expensive at Farm Progress Show. And
Yeah.
even that technology is expensive. Digital stuff's expensive. Making your factory completely autonomous is expensive, but these are some of the necessary steps that everybody's got to think about these days, I think. You have no choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other part is, the investment into seeds and, how do farmers maximize what they're able to get out of their land while also keeping it, healthy and sustainable and productive. And so the dynamics of the financials of farming are are tough right now. And commodity prices are they're not great in certain commodities. And so we really have to look at where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years from now? How do we want to feed the world? How do we want to be producing food? And is it, clearly the way that we've always done it, it works, but is that the most efficient in terms of the labor and the equipment that we have? So again, I think that we're ripe for a major disruption and, some of it might be based on cost.
Yeah, I completely
We
agree.
can't afford big pieces of equipment.
No. Well, you're going to go on in your career and do whatever the next move is for you. Um, Whatever that is, it doesn't really matter. But what are some areas in that next move that you think you feel are important to put some emphasis on here for the next 2, 3, 4? You've got to look ahead and be that kind of visionary. What's your point of emphasis to all the listeners out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, it's how do we give farmers value and help them maximize the opportunity for the seed in the ground? That to me is fundamental because we've got one shot. Somebody said there's only like 25 harvest seasons or 25 growing seasons before 2020, 2050. And when you start to put it into those sorts of terms,
Dang, that's interesting. Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
different, right?
Yeah.
And so, the realization that I had when I was at Seedmaster was the complexity of, like, putting seed in the ground. Let's A, make sure it's the right seed at the right depth, at the right time, with the right fertilizer and anything else that can come around it. We rely so heavily on moisture from like, we don't have a lot of irrigation in Western Canada, but, you know, there's a number of factors that a farmer can do everything perfectly, and yet at the end of harvest, if she's done everything perfectly and Mother Nature decides the day before it's combined that we're gonna throw some hail in there. Like, you lose everything, and
Yeah.
and I've seen where that happens, and it's heart-wrenching. And so for myself, I'm really excited to be able to, to look at where in that supply chain can I make a difference? And I know on my end that seeding side is where I get most excited, which is part of the reason that I was super excited to spend, 5 minutes at Corteva.
Yeah.
Because, and a lot of it was I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time with the scientists, and it was fascinating because they wanted they were very committed to how do we look at a seed, how do we develop a seed that can survive, not and again, to use the term from earlier, not just survive, but thrive in conditions that are really tough, like no moisture. You're planting in soil that may or may not have any sort of fertilizer within it. And so what is it that that seed needs to be able to be productive?
Yeah. I had a guy from Stein Seed on. His name
Yeah.
was David Thompson, and some of the technology that they do, it was like it was mind-blowing. Like, I can't even believe this kinda stuff happens in the world. I mean, it's crazy chemistry and crazy engineering and innovation and, to your point, all with the seed, all to make sure that the seed has this genetic to be able to thrive in this specific location in the ground, with these weather, with this moisture, with I mean, it's fortunate there's some really, really smart people working on this from Stein to Corteva to all of them. And then what can you spray on it? Or maybe more importantly nowadays, what can you not spray on it because then that all gets into our systems as
Yeah.
consumers, uh, to make it so it still continues to thrive after weeds take over or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I think that's an intelligent way to look at it. Let's start with that very simple thing, and then how does it all work from there? I mean, there's so many factors with it, but that's a good point of emphasis for sure. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, the other part that I'm curious about is just, you know, how are farmers doing? What is it that they're worried about? And so I try to get out. I mean, I'm married to a farmer, so my poor husband, he gets lots of questions from me, as do some of the people that he works with. So I'm sure I drive them crazy. But it's really, I think, important, like, when you look at the early innovations, they often happened in the winter months because that's when farmers had a bit more time. They'd sit on the tractors, and I'm referencing sort of my dad's generation. They'd sit on the tractors and think about all these things that are going wrong and that they could fix. And so then they'd, fix them in the winter. And now farming has become more, 12-month engagement because, there's the trucking, hauling, and various seasons for harvest. So, as I look at where the innovation lies, my hope and my call out to your farmer listeners is to keep asking those harder questions that are disruptive. Why do we do it this way? What can we do? What are the workarounds that we're doing? And anytime we've got a workaround, that's a signal for innovation, in my opinion,
Mhm.
because we shouldn't have to be continuing to work around and do, like, I think if you have to do a workaround 4 times, then that you, like, just change how you're doing it.
Yeah.
But, that probably has to do more with equipment and how you seed and how you combine. But I think that, that's where I'm hopeful that our industry will, continue empowering farmers to be as innovative as they have been over the years, um, because that's where I think the productivity is going to come from. It's, people like me that are kind of on the periphery, we help and we can enable certain things, but
Yeah.
the best ideas are still gonna come from the farmers themselves, I think.
And that might circle back to the CEO conversation we had earlier. Like, if enough voices are speaking it, you kind of have no choice but to open up your ears and listen. And I think that's maybe happening a little bit in the U.S. with Trump and he's the ultimate CEO, right? He's the CEO in a sense of the U.S., but also kind of the world. And you gotta listen, even if it's people that are on your side, because if you voted for Trump or if you didn't, uh, that doesn't mean that everything's perfect and things can't change. And sometimes you got to try a few things out before something actually sticks. And, right now we're all trying to find the inroads, and it's hard to see that light at the end of that tunnel. But you're right. There's a lot of guys sitting on a tractor or driving down the road in windshield time with really cool ideas. Let them rip, speak them, get on platforms, go on social media. There's positive things to all that, and let them rip. So, yeah, it's super good advice, Leah. What about in your conversation in Ottawa this week? Can you share is there anything that you wanna share or enlightening things that came out of that conference that you're like, "Okay, this is what Canada is thinking about, and this is what really affects the Canadian farmer," and, what about that in your opinion is worth hearing?
Yeah, the conference was about what are the big, issues facing agriculture. So trade was a big topic, as was, looking at what are other industries doing to be innovative and to embrace sort of data and digital transformation. One of the areas that was suggested was to look at, any industries where we can do a dual purpose. So being in agriculture and then in another industry. And the defense industry was raised as one that agriculture could potentially look at for innovation opportunities, which I thought was really interesting because I think defense industry has always been very avant-garde in terms of you know, needing to be innovative because those on the defense side are operating under conditions that are very, tight. So, that was one of the topics is how do we continue being innovative? But the biggest topic for sure was just trade relations and, concern about how do we keep our, trade opportunities open and I think the biggest challenge outside of Ottawa, when I'm talking to industry colleagues, the biggest challenge we've got right now, and I don't think this is, specific to Canada. My assumption is that it's similar in the US, but it's just the business environment is so uncertain right now. And so, kind of like that farmer that you do everything right, and then Mother Nature right before harvest throws hail at you. And so then it's like, boom, you're like, you've lost everything. So it kind of feels a bit like that in terms of the business environment right now, where everybody's trying their best with the information they have, but the uncertainty that is being invoked by some of our, government decision makers is just making it tough. And so again, the opportunity is like, well, let's have conversations with them. Let's talk to them about what they're doing and try to be a partner with them to be able to solve some of these. And again, one of the things that I think the US administration, particularly under Trump, has done exceptionally well is changes to the corporate business environment and the taxes. It's made the US a really good place to set up a new company.
Mhm.
And so, it's not all doom and gloom and there's not all like I'm not saying that, our government I'm not trying to pull too much judgment on this, but I do think there's a lot of opportunities and that again, we work better together than if
Yeah.
we're fighting each other.
Yeah, oh my gosh, 100%. And I wonder how much of it is just my thought was triggered here, but how much of this is coming off such a agriculture is always this, but we were way up in 21, 22, 23, part of 24, like crazy record years. Everybody had tons of money. And now all of a sudden the bottom fell out. And you wonder how much of it is just, I mean, dare I say greed maybe is getting in the way. We're like, yeah, we just want it to be there forever. That's not a sustainable path either. You know, I think there needs to be a new normal. B- Everybody talks about the new normal when there's highs, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong word, but it was these unbelievable times that the a lot of people knew weren't going to last. I mean, that's not a sustainable plan. We knew that. So,
Yeah.
right? And is it ever gonna come back to that? I don't know. To me, it doesn't make sense. I think everyone's gonna be leery in the next upswing to be like, "I'm not gonna buy as much inventory. I'm gonna slow things down.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pull some money. I'm not gonna spend as much." Everybody learned from all that, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think the interest rates have really played into that right now. Like the interest rates, of the 80s made some people very, very reluctant to ever take on debt. And I think in the ag equipment industry, there's many of the founders that, they built their companies during that time and therefore really pride themselves on never taking debt.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the generation of business leaders that are coming, I think we do have to be a bit careful because we want and need to learn from what's going on, but then also to be able to adapt to the opportunities. And so I would hope that, things will get better. That there's no reason for me to think that they
History tells us they will. Of course. Yeah.
history
Yeah.
says that they will. And I think agriculture has always had that it's very cyclical. Like those years, I think it used to be a 7-year cycle, and I think we were seeing that the ups were elongated to 10 to 12 years, which is pretty unusual when you look at it over, again, I'm dating myself here, but over a 100-year history of, like, what's happening with commodity prices. And we do have, I'll say my generation, your generation, you and I have an obligation to make sure that, the next generation coming in, that they know that there's good opportunities within agriculture, that they want to be in the industry, and that there are so many facets that they can get into. It's just a matter of where they happiest and where can their skills be best applied. But the industry is, I mean, we feed the world. And at the end of the day, if farmers are doing well, everybody's doing well. And I think that that's important because we
Yeah.
do want, young people staying within the farm and taking it up because at this point, like well, there are a number of farmers that are over the age of 70 that are still farming. And that's not to say that I don't think that's right. I think if they're loving it and they're passionate about it, that's great. But when your vision is not great, when your ability to hear that combine shuddering,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some things that are just a challenge, and we want to ensure that those who have worked for that long, that they can, enjoy the fruits of their prosperity and their many years of farming. And so it's important that the young people are getting into farming and see a very bright future because if they don't, they won't come into it. And we'll start to see, real labor shortages. Like we already have labor shortages in the agriculture industry, whether it's in vineyards or horticulture. I think they see it much more than we do on the commodity, like on the big broad grain crops. But it's our obligation, I think, and responsibility to make sure that the next generation sees the opportunity.
Yeah. I think that's definitely good words of wisdom to kinda close up on. It's so true, and there's a reason why you and I have been in agriculture for so long. Sometimes I kick myself, like, I shoulda gone into freaking, I don't know, what something else. But it gets into you. It's like, you become kind of addicted to the industry, and it's fascinating to me. And one of the best parts about agriculture that I've always just loved is the people. There's such good people that wanna do that have that same mentality you have. Ultimately, we are feeding the world, and that's a very important role, regardless of whatever it is you're manufacturing, or farming or whatever. There's an importance to that, and the people have that same mentality of get your fingers dirty or your fingernails dirty and keep it going, and I hope the younger generation feels that too, and I think they will if we are good stewards of our businesses and our people and our customers. And hey, time will tell, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, in the university class that I'm teaching, there's probably 50% of them come from grain farming, ranching, dairy, and vineyards. And the other 50% are just curious.
Yep.
And it's really interesting to me as their professor to hear what their assumptions are about the industry and then also to hear why they're interested in it. And a lot of it comes down to they want to know where their food comes from. And like that's the consumers of today are very different than when you and I grew up. And I know on our end, like I ate a lot of Velveeta cheese and cheese whiz. Like, I
Yeah, I
have
hear you.
salt tolerance, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Who knows what we were actually eating? I have no idea. Yeah. Was it
well, and we both turned out okay. I mean, it's
it's up for argument, Leah. It's yet to be determined in my case. But yeah, I agree.
yeah, yeah,
No, you're right, people do care about that. That's a whole totally different topic, but you're so right. The way we eat and the way we care about ourselves or what we're consuming is super important, and I see absolutely nothing wrong with that.
yeah,
Why are we making that a political thing? My gosh, stop, folks, stop. It's important to even let's look into it, and that's true, and guess who can change that and be the kind of the forefront of that change?
yeah,
That's the guy or the gal that's driving the tractor, putting the seed in the ground. That's where it starts, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I could talk to you for hours. This has been awesome, and For those that want to follow Leah, you're a great follow on socials. So look her up on LinkedIn, LeaHolson. You've got this amazing career with a great perspective, and I'm so excited to see what the next notch on your map is going to be. So I know we'll stay connected. I'm sure we'll see each other down the road. I'm going to get up to Canada for sure. Maybe not in 25, but for sure in 26. And good luck with everything. Congratulations on everything. Thank you. I'm so grateful for you to come on this show and give me an hour of your time. And yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Well, and likewise, Joe. I mean, it's seeing you just prosper and be awesome, even more awesome in this space has been really exciting to see. So congratulations on your new on this chapter and what you're doing to help raise the profile of so many good people in the industry.
Thank you so much. Awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Leah Olson. Reach driven leaders with the Germinate podcast. Sponsor our show to align your brand with actionable insights and purposeful growth. Contact us today at embosales.com/podcast. That's www.embosales.com/podcast to partner and inspire our growing audience of professionals. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning into the Germinate podcast. If you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others in the industry. And join me next time as we continue to explore the innovations and strategies shaping the future of agriculture and business. Until then, keep growing, keep innovating, and keep germinating your success.